Let's get started with Genesis 41 and 42. We're right in the middle of the story of Joseph. He has now moved into the highest place in the land through a series of dreams. He's had two dreams that are not yet fulfilled, where the sun and moon and stars bow down to him, or the sheaves of wheat, which we know are going to be his father and mother and brothers. And then he has had time in prison where he interprets two dreams for the baker and the cupbearer. And then he gets several years later, Pharaoh has two dreams which he interprets, which raises him into the position in the land. So these dreams have been a big part of the theme of Joseph's lives, and they've led him to this point. Now that he is second in command, he's not completely free. The Pharaoh still is over him. They've gone through 7 great years, and now they're heading into the 7 hard years of famine. He's taken 20% tax, stored it up, all the grain at like a 20% tax rate, and put it in storehouses with guards. And now, not only is Egypt in famine, but so are the surrounding nations. And if you know anything about a famine, that's a time of social unrest, tends to be a time of war. Many wars have started over famines, right? There's food scarcity, and Joseph has huge storehouses of food. So instead of other places invading, they're coming to buy food. It's making Egypt incredibly wealthy, especially the rulers of Egypt. The people as well have to buy back the grain that they were taxed. So we're just seeing this whole plan now come to fruition in Genesis 42 and 43. Also, there's these threads of this narrative that are left hanging open, right? Joseph's brothers have sold him into slavery, and that's going to have to get reconciled. And I think last time we left off just talking about Joseph needing to keep his heart right. This has been a long time, and he could have easily allowed bitterness and resentment and unforgiveness stew in his heart. But we're going to find that that's not who Joseph is, that he serves the Lord, and he sees the bigger plan and purpose to what his brothers did. Now, I'm not saying what they did was right or good in selling him into slavery, but it did forward the plan of God to bring salvation to the whole earth. Salvation meaning, in this case, from death from a famine, not salvation meaning eternal life, but the saving of humanity through this. And so, again, we see Joseph being one of those really key figures, a little bit like Noah, that the people of the earth desperately needed him. So let's just jump into Genesis 42 and just go through the narrative. I'll discuss a little bit as we go, some of the highlights and maybe spiritual takeaways. But in general, we're going to be looking at probably the idea of forgiveness here and what that looks like, and reconciliation, right? There's forgiveness, but then there's trust that's going to have to be built, those types of things in this story. And part of this is, if you remember, Joseph doesn't really know what happened. He doesn't know the full story that some of the brothers wanted to kill him. Reuben had this secret plan to sneak him away in the night and get him back home, just put him in the cistern for a bit. He didn't know that Judah was the one that wanted to rescue him from death by selling him, that slavery actually was one of the better options given the situation. He doesn't know any of that. He doesn't know which brothers were for and against him. So there's going to be some of this where Joseph is also trying to figure out his own brothers' hearts and their history. Are they still murderous towards him? It's a little bit like Jacob and Esau's reuniting when Esau is heading towards Jacob with hundreds of armed men, and Jacob's saying, oh no, this is the end. How can I rearrange my wives and children so they don't all get killed? Joseph's kind of thinking the same thing here, like, is this going to end up in another bad situation with my brothers, right? He's now top in the land. Maybe he doesn't want to be exposed for any reason by his brothers or hated by them in front of the Egyptians. We don't know the whole dynamic, but in general, that is partly what these next couple of chapters are going to be grappling with, is hard family dynamics. And I think it's something that's important to us even now as we look, how do we interact with people? How do we find out where people are at in their hearts? And so Genesis 42:1, we see, now Jacob saw that there was grain in Egypt, and Jacob said to his sons, why are you staring at one another? Then he said, look, I've heard that there is grain in Egypt, so go down there and buy some for us from that place so that we may live and not die. So Jacob is being very practical here. He just says, you know what, we need grain, go to Egypt. Now, we know in the past that they were not to be going to Egypt. Isaac was not to go to Egypt. Abraham was not to go to Egypt. So that he's sending his sons there is a little bit questionable. But there's really nothing to do at this point. Again, he sees this as a life and death situation. So it's only about 2 years into the famine at this point, but the people in the promised land were already suffering from this great famine, right? if you have 1 or 2 years without crops being able to come up, you don't have any food left. You've replanted everything and nothing happened. And so your grain is gone. So in verse 3, we see that 10 of Joseph's brothers went down to buy grain, but Jacob wouldn't let Benjamin go, the youngest. So he said, I'm afraid that harm may happen to him. So the sons of Israel came to buy grain, those who were coming, because the famine was in the land of Canaan as well. So the 10 brothers come down to see Joseph, and these were the sons of Leah and the 2 concubines. So Joseph and Benjamin, if you remember, were the sons of Rachel. And so Jacob had a special place in his heart. Also, Benjamin was quite a bit younger, and he didn't want the same thing happening to him as it happened to Joseph. Probably he was treating Benjamin the same way. Benjamin probably replaced Joseph as the favored son and was getting all the special treatments. And the other brothers, having what happened with Joseph, maybe there was some of the same feelings towards Benjamin, being from Rachel, the favored wife. And so again, these are Leah and the 2 concubine, or 2 of the maids' wives that he had, their sons. So these 10 sons come. It's amazing that all these years later, all 10 of these sons are still together. None of them have died. None of them have left. Nothing has happened. They still are all around Jacob. It's still a very tight family unit. And so again, like we see these older sons, and they're all definitely older than Joseph, right? Joseph was the youngest of this set. He was the 11th. And so Joseph's heading towards 30 years old at this point, or maybe even later now, because we've had the 7 years of good and 2 years. He might be closer to 39 at this point. I'm sure I put it in our notes. I'll have to check that as we go. But so it says that the last time they saw Joseph, he was 17, and now he's 39. It's been 22 years. And so again, that means all of them are over the age of 39 that are coming to see him. And so they're well into their older ages and able to travel and be on their own. And so again, it's very interesting that all 10 of them come together. And maybe it's for safety or some reason, but they all come. And now Joseph was the ruler over the land. He was the one who sold grain to all the people of the land. And Joseph's brothers came and bowed down to him with all their faces to the ground. So they don't know who Joseph is. They just are being honoring. And now this is the fulfillment, in part, of Joseph's dream. Not his mom and dad bowing down to him, but his 10 brothers have now bowed down to him. You've got to think that this is highly impacting him. He hadn't seen his own dreams fulfilled, even though he's seen Pharaoh's fulfilled. He's seen the baker and the cupbearer's dreams fulfilled. But this is the first he's seen his. You've got to think in his head, he's immediately feeling that sense of, oh, this is a completion of those dreams. And again, so this seems like just one of those places where Joseph would have had a deep reflection of God's faithfulness. And you would think he would be reflecting on that. And we'll see later that he is. He's going to say, God had this larger plan for my life. He's seeing the fulfillment of it. Now, so 22 years since he probably had those dreams until there's any fulfillment at all. And like I said, dreams, the brothers just show up out of nowhere. It's not like there's some steps that were taken. These things that God keeps doing, there's no momentum towards them happening and being fulfilled. They just happen all of a sudden out of nowhere. When Joseph gets out of prison, it's out of nowhere and he gets promoted. His brothers show up pretty much out of nowhere, and this is happening. And so we see these fulfillments come not in stages or in a process of what God said over Joseph's life, but in these all of a sudden moments. And I'm not saying that's normal, or sometimes we'll see a progression where we work towards something with God and we go on a journey with God. But in Joseph's life, it goes downhill, 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 and then all of a sudden it's uphill, and just instantly God intervenes and changes everything. It's that whole 180 thing that happens. And so when Joseph saw his brothers, he recognized them, but he disguised himself to them and spoke to them harshly. So he was probably unrecognizable. It had been a long time. He was wearing court clothes. He was dressing differently. He was shaving, probably more like the Egyptian style. If you've seen all the hieroglyphs and all the Egyptian things, right, they have sometimes eyeliners and different clothes they wear, different skin, maybe they'd been outside more. Whatever it might have been, he probably looked more like the Egyptians than like his brothers at this point. And he says to them, where have you come from? He also is speaking Egyptian at this point. We know that because some of the text will tell us. So he probably sounds completely fluent he probably does not come off at all as one of their brothers. And they said, from the land of Canaan to buy food. But Joseph had recognized his brother, although they did not recognize him. So their dress hadn't changed. Their hairstyles, beard styles, whatever it might have been, hadn't changed. They just aged 22 years. And some of them probably, in their mid-20s to mid-40s, probably look pretty similar. But Joseph being a teenager to now is probably quite a bit different. So again, he's speaking to them in the Egyptian language, and he's definitely looking quite culturally different, probably shaving and all kinds of things that are different in the Egyptian culture. And it says, so I already got to this, in verse 9 it says, and Joseph remembered the dreams which he had about them, and he said to them, you are spies, you have come to look at the undefended parts of our land. So it says he remembers a dream, but then he speaks to them and accuses them. So it's kind of strange. The dreams are being fulfilled, but then why is Joseph acting so oddly? He knows in his heart that God's dream has been fulfilled, that they're bowing down before him, that all of this has come to pass. But he treats them, like he says, he's talking to them in stern tones. You're spies. You've come to check our land. Like there would have been every reason to be suspicious. Like I said, in the midst of a famine, you would think people would be coming to spy out to see how much food there was. Can we pillage or plunder? And having 10 men show up all from a different land, that does kind of come off as spies, right? Israel will do this later and send out 12 spies into the land. And so again, he's trying to probably at this point get information from them. If he accuses them of espionage or spying, he can then question them. And they said to him, no, my lord, but your servants have come to buy food. We are all sons of one man. We are honest men. Your servants are not spies. Yet he said to them, no, but you have come to look at the undefended parts of our land. But they said, your servants are 12 brothers in all, the sons of one man in the land of Canaan. And behold, the youngest is with our father today, and one is no longer alive. Yet Joseph said to them, it is as I have said to you, you are spies. By this you will be tested. By the life of Pharaoh, you shall not leave this place unless your youngest brother comes here. So basically, he's getting information from them. This false accusation, which he knows is false, that they're coming to spy, is just a way, he can do this in front of the Egyptians. He's probably going through a translator, and he's saying, oh, they're spying. And they give him this information. No, we're actually 12 brothers. One died. We still have one at home. He goes, then prove it. Go get your other brother. He better look like you, right? So they tell him that, and he's getting information. Him personally, he knows their dad's still alive. So Jacob's still alive, his father. So he could possibly see him again. He knows his younger brother's still alive, and he really wants to see his younger brother. If nothing else, he probably is also a little afraid of these brothers. How are they treating his younger brother? Are they going to enslave him? Are they going to try to kill him as well? He knows that they hadn't been good to him, and he's probably thinking the same thing about Benjamin. Probably in all of this, he's trying to get his father and Benjamin out of these brothers' hands. He probably has a very clear understanding of what they did to him, and he doesn't know if their hearts have changed. We're not even sure if that's what he's trying to get from them, is whether or not their hearts changed, but he's just trying to get information, probably to protect his brother. So he's basically is now going to concoct a plan to get Benjamin to come, and then trying to keep Benjamin to stay, right? He's going to place a cup in Benjamin's bag and accuse him so he can bring him back to the palace. That doesn't work out. Actually, he ends up having to deal with all 10 of them. So again, in verse 16, it says, send one of you and have him get your brother while you remain confined, so that your words may be tested, whether there's truth in you. But if not, by the life of Pharaoh, you are certainly spies. So he put them all together in prison for 3 days. So he says, basically, figure out among yourselves, while you're in prison the next 3 days, which one of you is going to go home and get your brother. And I'm keeping the rest of you because I've accused you of spying. And in this time, he's going to get to have his guards listen to them in the prison. He can have them under his watch. He can see if they've changed or if they're treating Benjamin the same way. How do they talk about Benjamin? And he understands their native tongue. So again, this is all just kind of part of Joseph figuring out what's going on here. Like I said, he doesn't necessarily know the whole story that we do, right? He doesn't know which brothers have been on his side and which ones hadn't. He may not know much of any of that. So verse 18, now Joseph said to them on the third day, do this and live, for I fear God. If you are honest men, let one of your brothers be confined in your prison. But as for the rest of you, go carry grain home, right? And bring your youngest brother. and then you'll not die. So basically, he says, I'll just keep one of you. How about all of you go, carry all the grain home? I don't want your family to die. I get it. Like, this is a really bad famine. But one of you's staying, and we're going to do a prisoner swap, basically. Go get your younger brother so we can verify him, and you can have your prisoner back. So only one has to stay. So they start talking. Now, we have to know that Jacob is not going to go for this. He's not going to give up his favored Benjamin son for one of the other sons. He's already treated the others as though they didn't mean much, right? And so again, we get the sense too that he's letting them go to Egypt as not a big deal, but he's keeping Benjamin behind. It really is Benjamin being the favored one, the one that seems to be the one he's picking out to be the inheritor of things. And so again, they say, now the brothers realize, wait a second, truly we're guilty concerning our brother because we saw the distress of his soul when he pleaded with us, yet we would not listen. For that reason, this distress has happened to us. So they understand that this imprisonment is like, we would say what you did to others is coming back to get you. And so they're like, we're in prison now. We sold our brother into slavery. So Reuben answered them, did I not tell you, do not sin against the boy? And you would not listen. Now justice for his blood is required. So they're seeing this as some bigger picture of them selling Joseph. And now they're getting falsely accused of spying and being imprisoned. And again, Joseph probably didn't know Reuben stood up for him back then. And he's might be hearing some of this or being reported this. Don't sin against the boy. Like they're having this conversation about, oh, we heard him crying out. Like there was some empathy involved. Like they weren't all just hardened, right? So we're getting a little bit of sense of a little bit more of the story here. They also have this firm sense that they're probably a guilty conscience if they're immediately saying, oh, this is justice for his blood. So again, if you don't have a guilty conscience, you wouldn't be thinking, oh, I'm in prison right now. You'd just be thinking, oh, this is just a bad king in Egypt having a bad day, and he wants to imprison anybody that looks different. No, they're saying, oh, this is justice for what we did. So you kind of get the sense that there's like this guilt that's hanging over them all these years. And you have to think that they've seen their father grieving, and the consequences on them, on him, were far more than what they expected in his grief. And so the 10 of them are now feeling imprisonment. They're feeling false accusation. And it's partly they're going, wait, this is what Joseph was talking about, that sheer desperation of wanting to be let out and not being able to do anything. And they go, and we did that to him. And now he's basically doing that to them. Again, we know Joseph's heart that he's not going to be enslaving them. But at the same time, they are getting a little bit of a taste for imprisonment and things. And Joseph had suffered that for years. And so this is giving them a little bit of like what he went through in just a small amount for 3 days. They did not know, however, that Joseph understood, for there was an interpreter between them, and he turned away from them and wept. So Joseph, like I said, this is new information for him. He didn't realize that they had heard his distress and they had remembered his pleading, that they weren't as hardened, and that Reuben had stood up for him. He's finding out his oldest brother, Reuben, was actually on his side saying, didn't I tell you don't sin against the boy? Like he had a brother that was on his side. He didn't know that. And so Joseph is now weeping. He's realizing that it's not all of them. It wasn't a complete group effort, that even if he did have any unforgiveness or bitterness, some of that is going to be shattered even by the storyline, right? That Reuben was not out to kill him. And so that's got to really change things, right? You can kind of think, well, Simeon and Levi killed a whole city. I can see why they would be kind of murderous too. And Reuben then was like, no, don't do this. They didn't know, however, that Joseph understood, right? And so they're speaking very freely here. He's getting a lot more of the story. But when he returned to them and spoke to them, he took Simeon from them and bound him before their eyes. So we don't know why Simeon. Reuben was the oldest, so maybe they really thought he needed to go home to deal with this, because it sounds like he's usually the speaker and one of the major voices. Simeon may have been also the one that was the most, like I said, Simeon and Levi had already killed a village. They may have been the most hot-headed ones anyway. And so possibly just as being one of the older brothers, but not the oldest, he kept Simeon. And he had a history of violence. So again, and maybe he wanted to protect Benjamin from that as well. So then Joseph gave orders to fill their bags with grain, but he also returned every man's money in his sack and to give them provisions for the journey, and that was what was done for them. So now Joseph has a lot to hold over their head. He's putting their money back in their bags, which means that at any point he can accuse them of stealing, and they know that. So basically, he's putting them in a very bad situation of having both their money and their stuff. It's also a generous situation. They've obviously bought a ton of grain, and so they loaded up their donkeys with their grain and departed from there. But when one of them opened his sack to give his donkeys feed overnight, he saw the money, and he said to his brother, "My money's been returned." Oh, and their hearts sank, and they turned trembling to one another, saying, "What is this that God has done to us?" And so they don't know it's Joseph that did it. All they know is somehow they ended up with their money back in their sacks, and they figure it's God out to get them. They've had 3 days in prison. They've been accused of being spies in a foreign land. Like, this is not going well for them. It's really bringing them to fear, and in a sobering moment, their whole life choices are catching up to them. And they don't even realize that it's not just God doing it, that Joseph's involved. And you kind of see that irony here, that they immediately attribute all of this to God. And in some ways, Joseph is kind of acting in that role. And he's literally just blessed them. He's not going to accuse them of stealing. And so, again, this was just Joseph being kind. And even the kindness, because of their guilt, is being taken with fear and trembling. And so, again, it's just the way you read how they're reading the situation as they're in it is not the intent of the situation at all. So they've been generously given their money back by Joseph. And to them, this is a terror, and to him it was a blessing. So they're scared. They've already been imprisoned, and now they're thieves from another country. And so they've only been treated harshly at this point by Joseph, and they really do believe that God is finally catching up to justice and punishment and disciplining them. So verse 29, it says, when they came to their father, they told him everything that happened. So I'm paraphrasing a lot of these verses. You can read them. Then the man, the Lord of the land, spoke harshly with us and took us for spies of the country. So they basically say they don't know it's Joseph, right? So he's harsh. He said we didn't get any favor from him. They have no reason to believe. We're honest men. We're not spies. We have 12 brothers. No one isn't alive, and the youngest is with our father in the land of Canaan. And so again, they basically tell him, we need the grain or we're going to die. And he says, no, you have to bring your youngest brother, so we know you're not spies. And so now Jacob is in this place of having to decide, is he going to let Benjamin go, and with all the other brothers, which would risk the whole family line, or is he going to just say, I'm just going to hold on to Benjamin really tightly, and Simeon can just stay in jail? And remember, Jacob is mad at Simeon and Levi. He's mad at them for killing that village and causing all that trouble. He's mad at them, and he's even not giving them the same kind of blessings by the end of his life. He never lets it go. So he's not happy with Simeon. So him being in jail is not a big deal to Jacob at this point. Again, Jacob is hearing this whole story. And now it came about as they were emptying their sacks that, behold, every man's bag of money was still in his sack. And they and their father saw the bags of money. They were afraid. So Jacob, most likely at this point, is just going to assume his sons are thieves and deceivers, that whatever story they're telling him isn't true. And so he's like, you lost Simeon. I'm not giving you Benjamin, right? Like, that's got to be his thoughts here. Like, and you're telling me that this money just showed up and you guys didn't steal from them. Like, how do I know that you didn't go lose Simeon in some sort of raid and steal all this grain, right? You still have your money with you. And so again, this to Jacob just isn't adding up. And he basically says, and Reuben said to his father, you may put my 2 sons to death if you do not bring him back to you, but put Benjamin in my care and I'll return him to you. Reuben, again, is the one that steps in. We only see a couple of the brothers actually speak in any of this narrative, and Reuben is one of those. But Jacob said, my son, Benjamin, my favorite one, is not going to go, for his brother is dead and he alone is left. If harm shall happen to him on the journey you are taking, then you will bring my gray hair down to Sheol in sorrow. So Jacob basically says, no. Reuben, I know you just offered your 2 sons to me, but listen, Benjamin's the only son I really care about, is pretty much what he's saying. And no, there's no trading anybody for Benjamin. It's all he has left of Rachel. He doesn't have Rachel or Joseph. He's been grieving these 22 years, the loss. And so he's lost both Rachel and Joseph in that time. and Benjamin is what he considers his lone son, basically. Even though he's got 10 other sons that he knows are still alive, he really doesn't trust them. And this is a harsh family dynamic, right? We've seen this favoritism cause problems from the beginning, and here it's about to jeopardize the whole family's safety as they're in the midst of a famine and they need to go back to Egypt to get more grain. They're only 2 years into the famine. They don't have a lot of food. And Reuben is trying to bring sense to this. He's like, we're not deceiving you. Again, Jacob was used to being deceived. He deceived Esau, Laban deceived him. So he is not really trusting his boys at all. And you kind of have to give it to Jacob. This story sounds kind of crazy. Where did you get your money and this grain from? You're not really telling me the whole story. And so again, and he knows the last time he sent Joseph out, he didn't come back with these same 10. Why would he trust another son to them? So we see this really, really hard family position. There's not a lot of trust, and there's a lot of broken relationships here. Reuben also was the one that had slept with one of Jacob's concubines or wives. And so there's been that, which was kind of Reuben's way of trying to usurp his father's role. So there's already been some tensions here that are really not great. We'll see that actually later in the blessings of Jacob, that some of the sons really aren't in a favored position with Jacob. And so in Genesis 43, we're going to have the continuation of this narrative. Now the famine was severe in the land, so it came about when they had finished eating the grain which they had brought from Egypt, that their father said to them, "Go back, buy us a little food." They are out of food. And so now Jacob is like, okay, so this has been months. Simeon is sitting in jail. Jacob's fine with this. He's got Benjamin. Everything's fine. We can just keep doing this. Maybe the rain will come back. Maybe, there'll be some food. Reuben's earlier negotiations had failed. Jacob doesn't want to risk Benjamin, but here's the problem. We have, everyone is in jeopardy now. Jacob and all 10 of his sons, all his grandsons, they don't have any food. And so Judah spoke to him, however, saying, "The man sternly warned us, 'You shall not see my face unless your brother is with you. If you send our brother with us, we will go down and buy you food. But if you do not send him, we will not go down. For the man said to us, you will not see my face unless your brother is with you.'" They're more scared of Joseph than they are of Jacob at this point. Jacob is the head of the household, but these sons are getting older, and there's 10 of them. And they're basically saying, no, we will not go put ourselves back in prison and in this situation without our brother. We're not going to do this for you. You either send him or we don't go and we all die. And so, again, they are in this position. They don't try to sneak off to some other city where Joseph isn't watching. Like, you've got to think Egypt's a large place. They could have tried to sneak in and get grain somewhere else in Egypt or buy it somewhere else. No, they go, we're not doing this. Like, they're going to know that we're from foreign places. We have to go through this particular place and we have to get grain from him. So Judah is the one that gets the second speaking role, right? We've had Reuben. Reuben has been discredited, and we'll find that out in the blessing statements of Jacob, that being the first, and then Simeon and Levi being 2 and 3, second and third sons of Jacob. And then the fourth son is Judah, but he has the favor on him still. And he is going to become, the promised kingly line is going to come from him. He's going to get an extra blessing from Jacob. And so he's been the one that when Reuben can't get the brothers to do something, Judah steps in and can. And so we'll see Judah typically being the son that actually gets things done, where Reuben can't. Reuben kind of has been disqualified and Judah isn't. And so again, Judah steps in and he says, okay, logically, we're just not doing this, right? Like family meeting, like there's 10 of us. We're not putting ourselves in harm's way. We've got children too. Judah just basically says, Benjamin's coming or we can't go. So again, Judah's also one that when Reuben's plan failed to sell Joseph, Judah was the one that stepped in and got the plan so they wouldn't kill Joseph and they just sell him. Again, so these typically are the two voices we see in the family. And that's right, because Reuben's the oldest and disqualified, and Judah will be more of the lead of the tribes as we go. So then Israel said, "Why did you treat me so badly by telling the man whether you still had another brother?" But they said, "The man specifically asked about us and our relatives, saying, 'Is your father still alive? Have you another brother?' So we answered his questions. Could we possibly know that he would say, 'Bring your brother down'?" So they're like, this is a little strange. When they were being interrogated, Joseph was very pointed. He asked about their dad, not their mom. He knew his mom had already passed when he left, and he knew that there was one brother. And so he specifically, and he knew there would be no other brothers, right? His mom had already passed. So Joseph had asked such specific questions. He wanted to know about his brother and his father, not about the mother, not about sisters, not about anybody else, right? So Judah said to his father, Israel, send the boy with me, and we will arise and go so that we may live and not die, we as well as you and our little ones. I myself will take responsibility for him. You may demand him back from me if I do not bring him back to you and present him to you. Then you can let me take the blame forever. For if we had not delayed, surely by now we could have returned twice. So Judah basically says, I know Reuben was going to swap you two of his sons, but in this case, I'll take the blame forever. And it seems like Jacob still has a soft place for Judah. And Judah, is able to convince him. He's also laying out the seriousness. We're going to die. Like we're out of food. We need this now. And so Judah waits for the timing until there's a dire need, right? He does the same with Joseph. He knows they're going to kill him soon, so he gets them to sell him. So again, we see that Judah is being protective of Benjamin. He's being protective of the family, and he's going to be part of the reuniting of this family. Judah shows that how long they've left Simeon in prison. There's been no discussion here about, oh, we should go get Simeon back. Everybody knows that's not going to work with Jacob. It's really about the food. It's not about Simeon. And so again, this is a lot of family dynamics, right? A lot of problems in the past are now really cropping up. What Levi and Simeon did, how their father feels about them, is all coming back in this family dynamic that's kind of driving this whole situation. So then their father Israel said to them, if it must be so, take some of the best products of the land in your bag and carry them down to the man as a gift, a little balsam and a little honey, resin and myrrh and a bunch of almonds and things. And so again, take your money back too. Take your brother also, arise and return to the man. And may God Almighty grant you compassion in the sight of the man so that he will release to you your other brother and Benjamin. So he says, what little bits of food and like luxury foods we have and products, take those. Like just take anything you can to soften him up. Remember, this is Jacob. He's done this with Esau. Anytime he wants something, he tries to send gifts and tries to soften people up and work through things that way. He's saying the same thing here. So this is not new for Jacob. He's trying to like soften this so that the negotiations will go well. Take the money, take Benjamin, and hopefully this is going to work out. And he says, and may God Almighty grant you compassion, right? That this man sounds really harsh. This doesn't sound like a good, this thing. And he says, okay, maybe the money back in your bags was just a mistake. Maybe you guys weren't stealing. Like, okay, he's kind of giving in, right? And so we see in other stories, I was reading the narrative about Pharaoh and his heart keeps being hardened. We don't see a hardened heart here with Jacob. When things come push to shove, Jacob's doing what's right for the family, even though it's hard and it's costing him a lot. He's giving up the son after his wife and his other son, as he knows it, have died. And he's giving up Benjamin here. So they're going to take everything in Benjamin. This is all of Jacob's good stuff. And he's calling on the compassion of God now. We know the promises on Jacob's life. We know that he's been given to multiply children and blessings of God. And so this has got to be really hard. He's now 2 years into a famine. And he's got to be thinking he's always been on the increase in his life of blessing and of provision. We saw his sheep and his fields and all of this, the sheep and everything multiplied greatly under Laban. And now this is like one of the times that we're hearing that there's actually a famine, that he's facing something really challenging. And it doesn't look like the hand of God is on his family right now, right? This has got to be a little unsettling to him as they're going into not even having any food. And what do? We've been told we have to stay here in this land, but yet it's nearly impossible to do at this point. And he says, and as for me, if I am bereaved of my sons, I am bereaved. So the men took all the gifts and they took the double the money in their hands and Benjamin, and they set out and went to Egypt and stood before Joseph. So Jacob basically says, I'm a sad man already. If something happens, I'm just going to be even more devastated. So he's basically just giving in. And I don't know, after a couple of years of famine, maybe that's kind of where you are. You're just conceded that this isn't going to work out. And so again, Jacob is definitely scared. He's feeling loss. This is definitely not the kind of place you want to be in, especially as the leader of the family, right? So when Joseph saw Benjamin with them, he said to his house steward, bring the men into the house and slaughter an animal and make preparations for the men are to dine with me at noon. So the man did as Joseph said and brought the men to Joseph's house. Okay, This has got to be one of those scary moments, right? One of those moments when Esau is coming towards Jacob. Now Joseph is like, last time they got thrown in prison. So they're having to wait around. And now it's going to tell us a little bit of their feelings in this. So Joseph is preparing a feast. Just like Esau was coming to meet Jacob with a greeting and protection and an army and a troop to help him enter the land, Joseph's kind of doing the same thing. He's throwing a banquet. And in verse 18, it says, "Now the men were afraid because they were brought to Joseph's house, and they said, 'It is because of money that was returned in our sacks the first time that we are being brought in, so that they may attack us and overpower us and take us as slaves with our donkeys.'" So they are doing the same thing Jacob did years earlier. This has got to be bad. We have to wait till noon, and we're going to his house. Like that is just not positive. They just see this as a very harsh man. They've not seen kindness. They don't realize it was him that put the money back. They think, oh no, we've just got to sit here and wait. It's kind of one of those things when you're a little kid maybe and you did something and you just go sit in your room and wait until your parents come to talk to you about it. Just the waiting sometimes is worse than what's coming. They have that moment. It says the men were afraid because they were brought to Joseph's house. So again, they're misreading every situation. When the money's in their bag, they're afraid. When they're brought to his house, they're afraid. They have no idea there's a compassionate person. And to their credit, there's no reason they should believe Joseph's compassionate. He's been speaking to them harshly. He's to them as a foreigner speaking a different language. He's not even speaking to them in their own language. So he's definitely playing games to get information and to make sure that this is a safe situation, that this is even a situation he can enter into, and trying to figure out his place and what he can do here. You've got to think that Joseph's had to wait all this time with Simeon in jail. And so they have no idea this is a feast. They have no idea if they're going to end up in prison for more spying. And they have precious Benjamin with them. So in verse 19, they approached Joseph's house steward and spoke to him at the entrance of the house and said, "Oh, my lord, we indeed came down the first time to buy food. And it happened when we came to the campsite that we opened our sacks, and behold, each man money was in the opening of his sack, and the money is full. So we've brought it back in our hands. We have also brought down other money in our hand to buy food. We do not know who put our money in our sacks." So they are apologizing. They think this is all because of the money that was returned to them. They think that they're going to get discredited and that they somehow stole. The brothers are immediately explaining all this situation to the servant that probably does or doesn't know a lot about it. They're not spies. They're not thieves. They're trying to say, we're not spies and we're not thieves. But he said, "Peace be to you. Do not be afraid. Your God and the God of your father has given you treasure in your sacks. Your money was in my possession." So this servant basically says, "I got your payment. I don't know how you got that money. God must have put it there." And so again, this is a great thing. He's just like, the God of your father has found favor and given you treasure. And so basically he's saying, you owe us nothing and we're not accusing you of spying. And so you've got to think that they are now thoroughly confused, right? They think that this was God punishing them. And now this servant's telling them, no, it was God blessing them. This is the first positive thing that's happened to them in this entire interaction, right? They've had a brother in prison. They've spent time in prison. They've been accused of spying. They think they're back to be accused of thievery. They're waiting. And then he brought Simeon out to them. Wait, this is another good thing. Simeon's been freed. So this has got to be another positive step forward. But what's going to happen here? So things are starting to loosen up, right? So they're starting to see, wait a second, they're not accusing us of being thieves, and they're giving us Simeon back. Like, they're not putting us in jail with him. He's coming the other direction. In verse 24, then the man brought the men into Joseph's house and gave them water, and they washed their feet, and he gave their donkeys feed. So they prepared the gift for Joseph's arrival at noon, for they had heard that they were to eat a meal there. So they've been on this long journey. They're able to clean up. Their animals are provided for. So this is like a major amount of hospitality. And this would have been, more normal in their culture to give people water, food, feed the animals, do all of this. And they're not just doing this like in some side village or hut. This is at like a grand house of Joseph where they're being taken care of. So this is just a complete switch, right? They're not being taken to just the general hostel or hotel or inn or something in the area and staying with the locals. They're being taken to this major area. Simeon's been given back. They are probably completely nervous. They need to clean up. They're putting all the gifts together, making sure, the almonds and the honey and all the stuff that they brought is all packaged and perfect after this long journey, just for Joseph. And for they had heard that they were to eat a meal there. So they know now that they're cleaning up for a meal. They know their animals are being fed. They've been given water. Things are super positive at this point. And they have been eating probably very scarce amounts of grain and food back home, trying to ration it. And now they're going to have this huge meal. These gifts are getting ready just as Jacob told them to do. So they are also remembering what their father said on how to act and what to do in this situation. And they are listening. Then Joseph came home, and they brought into the house to him the gift which was in their hand, and they bowed down to the ground before him. So again, this is the same thing. There's 11 of them now, more of his dreams being fulfilled, bowing down to him. Before it was 10, now we're to 11, right? We had seen that it was all the sheaves and then his two parents as well. So he knows that this isn't fulfilled. He knows that his dream in part has been fulfilled with 10 of them bowing, now 11. He knows there's 2 more to come. Leah and Jacob are still to come. And he's going to have this interaction. And this is the first time Joseph has gotten to see Benjamin in all these years. And they were close brothers. They had the same mother. They were being raised together. They had the favor. They were probably living in the same little area together. And they're probably protective of one another, since the other brothers seem to be not liking them so much. So verse 27, then he asked them about their welfare and said, is your old father well, of whom you spoke? Is he alive? And they said, your servant, our father, is well. He is alive. And they bowed down again in homage. And so I don't know how customary it was to ask about fathers being still alive, but this is something that Joseph is very interested in. He knows that the dream is partly fulfilled, hasn't been fully fulfilled. He knows his father is supposed to be part of this. And he's not looking for their worship. He's just looking to have his family back, right? He really wants to see his father and all of this. He's interested in their father again, not the mother. He knows the mother isn't alive. So again, he's being very specific in his questions, not too specific so that they understand who he is. They're not in any way suspicious that they know him. They're not even thinking that. Now, they know that they sold him off to Egypt or somewhere. Maybe they didn't even know that completely, but this isn't even crossing their mind. To them, he's dead. That's how they keep narrating it. They know he's enslaved somewhere, but again, in verse 29, and as he raised his eyes and saw his brother Benjamin, his mother's son, he said, is this your youngest brother of whom you spoke to me? Then he said, may God be gracious to you, my son. Joseph then hurried out, for he was deeply stirred over his brother, and he looked for a place to weep. So he entered his chamber and wept there. So this is the second time we see him weeping. Number one, he's weeping when he meets the 10 brothers, and he gets this new information that Reuben had seen him and had stood up for him. And now he's weeping over Benjamin. Just the sight of Benjamin makes him weep. There had been no animosity between him and Benjamin, but Joseph wants to hide his identity. So he goes off to do this privately. He still doesn't want to tell the brothers who he is. And this seems difficult. They're all there now. Why not just tell them? Again, we're not told all of the narrative pieces or commentary on this. We're just given what we're given. He's not ready for them to know. He's still maybe working through some things. He's still trying to get a little bit more of a feel. How are they treating Benjamin? And so in verse 31, then he washed his face and came out, right? He's been crying. So he washes, he comes out composed. He controlled himself and said, serve the meal. Then they served him by himself and Joseph's brothers by themselves, and the Egyptians who ate with him by themselves, because the Egyptians could not eat bread with the Hebrews, for that is an abomination to the Egyptians. So there were 3 separate tables or areas, right? And so the brothers eat in one, and the Egyptians eat at others, and Joseph eats over and by himself, neither on the side of the Egyptians or the Hebrews at this point. So he's not giving away at all who he is. And he's still identifying himself as an Egyptian at this point. So now they were seated before him, from the first according to his birthright to the youngest according to his youth. And the men looked at one another in astonishment. Okay, so when you go to a place and they have those little name tags and you sit at the place they tell you to. So that's pretty much what's happening here, except they have them in perfect birth order. And you've got to remember, these brothers were born all in a very short time period, right? Between their mothers and concubines and everything, or the other wives going on, within a year or two of each other. They would have been indistinguishable in age at this point. They're all around 40, right? And so you have 10 brothers, and he puts them in perfect age order. And so now they are going, what just happened? So again, they're not comprehending the situation. And every time they go to read into it, they can't figure it out. There's no way anybody in Egypt would know their birth order. Like that's something you don't just talk about, or you're not wearing a number on your chest, right? And there's no, like, if you've ever seen people in their 40s, brothers, you'd never know which ones were the oldest and youngest. You might know the oldest from the youngest if there's a 10-year age difference, but to have them in perfect age order with their ages and their births being that close together, there was no way. And so again, obviously Joseph is kind of hinting at things here without revealing anything. And so again, this is incredible. This has to feel to them like an act of God again. Is God messing with us, right? And so then they took their portions to them from his own table, but Benjamin's portion was 5 times as much as any of theirs. So they drank freely with him. So then the servant also knows to go and give Benjamin 5 times more, that he's the favored son, obviously, and which is strange because usually the oldest should be the one that would be getting extra portions. And so again, we're just seeing that Joseph knows a lot about the family. He knows a lot about the dynamics and things going on here. And so this is just an incredible situation. And we're going to leave it at this point in the narrative and then pick up again in the next one. But just remember, this is Joseph kind of dealing with his heart. He's weeping. He's had months to kind of think this through. He's given them their money back. And in that case, he wasn't really messing with them. He just was being generous. We get the sense from them he was messing with them. Here he's putting them in age order. He might not have thought too much about that. He knew where they should have been sitting. But to them, all of this is being read into like in awe because they don't have the whole story. Again, Joseph doesn't either completely. He doesn't know which brothers were for him or any of that. He doesn't realize any of that. So it is becoming more clear, the whole storyline to him. And so again, he knows his brother's safe. They didn't sell him or kill him. And again, so this whole process is kind of Joseph exploring. I don't think he's trying to be duplicitous. He just doesn't want to reveal who he is too soon. And he has all the power in this situation anyway. He's just trying to collect more of the family and protect what he can of them. Again, he's probably being very protective of Benjamin here. So we're going to leave it there. And it's just, I think, a great place to reflect and think about just the process and the timelines of all of this. And then we'll step into the next part of the narrative.